So this is a little bit of an unusual episode of Dan's Model Works. We're at the clutter zone as usual, and you're probably wondering, well, no, not really, because you read the title of this particular episode, but why did I show some still shots of price tags of how much Testors Paint is in various places in the greater London metropolis here in Ontario? The reason I did that, and you don't have to tell me in the comments how cheap Testors Paint is where you live. I don't live there. I live here, and the price of Testors Paint is hovering around the $3 mark. So the reason I showed that was it's been about, almost 2 years since my father passed away. And among some of the things that we got from my mom's house was this really snazzy cardboard box here. My dad liked making cardboard boxes. But this contained a whole pile of Testors Paint and Tamiya paint. I think maybe a couple of tins of Humbrol paint. And they were basically his kind of working stash of hobby paint. And by the time he had this, it was mostly model railroading stuff that he was doing. So this box came over to our house and just kind of got sat aside. And a couple weeks ago, Natasha said, well, we should really integrate this paint into our stash of paint. And this is just a small amount of the paint that we have. And as you can see, I don't just use one brand of paint. I use all kinds of different paints, Testors, Model Master. I know they're both from the same company. Tamiya. I've got numerous craft paints, craft acrylics. I'm starting to get into these, and there are some challenges to using these, of course. I've got some Model Flex, Humbrol, of course, which used to be one of my favorites. Not quite so much now. So anyway, she said, we might as well take this paint and put it amongst the paint that we already have. And I'm like, oh, okay, go ahead. So as she's going through the box, she comes across these two. They date back to the days when stores would put a price tag on everything. So let's get a good focus on that. Both of these, Testors Paint, 79 cents. And this weird logo here is the logo of Canadian Exchange Stores, or CanEx. These are roughly the equivalent of PX and BX stores on U.S. military bases. And generally, depending on the size of the base, it would range from just a convenience store to where we lived when these were purchased, a full-blown department store, grocery store. There were banks, everything like that. So these were obviously purchased by my father at a Canadian Forces exchange store, a CanEx store. And I quickly did some math, and I thought, well, basically he wouldn't have bought these after we moved to St. Hubert in 1984, because that store wasn't large enough to stock something like hobby paint. So they had to have come from Petawawa. So were they purchased in 84? I don't think so. The reason is in 83, he was on a restricted posting, which meant that we lived in Petawawa in Ontario, but he was actually working in St. Hubert in Quebec. So he didn't have time for doing any sort of modeling or anything like that. The year previous to that, the end of 82, he was on a French course and didn't really have any time either. So I basically kind of said, these were purchased sometime in 1982 probably, which makes them over 36 years old. 1 or 2 days later, I looked at the price tag and I realized that they have a date code on them. And 82, that seems like a year. 1001, 1001. So this looks like these were either stocked on the shelf in January of 82 or possibly October of 82. But whichever date you want to go with, that puts them at 1982. And since this age, or this date here, basically agrees with the year that he would have purchased them, I'm going to go with 1982. So is this still paint? As I flop it around, you can see that we still have paint thinner in there. We still have the solvent in there. In both of them, it's still sloshing around. That does not mean that this paint is still good. Testors Paint has a habit of all of the solvent going to the top and the pigment turning into a brick at the bottom. That's one of the things that people tend to be really annoyed at Testors Paint for. Is generally it happens after you open it up, but sometimes even if you've never opened it up, that'll happen. Now, this one is, focus in on here, we've got Army Olive, and of course this is bilingual, seeing as this is Canada. This one is a mystery. I don't know what color it's supposed to be. Obviously, it's black, but whether or not it's a gloss black or flat black, I don't know. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to open up these little time capsules, and I'm going to stir them up and apply some paint to a chunk of plastic. Lord knows where I'm going to find a chunk of plastic around here. And let's see if these things still work, just out of curiosity, for kicks and giggles. Of course, the question is, can I even open these? Oh, that was quite easy to open this one. Oh, I get the feeling the cardboard... Oh, even the cardboard lid came off. Wow, that's impressive. So we've got the olive drab open. Let's see if we can get the black open. Oh, the black open too. Jeez. Obviously these have never been used, because normally you cannot get these things open. Oh, okay. So this one, the liner kind of stuck. Let's see if we can stir these up. We use one of my favorite brushes. All my favorite brushes look like they've been through a war. They're just really horrible shape. Okay, well, the brush went all the way to the bottom of the bottle. Pigment is pretty lumpy, but not solid. Let's give it a good stir and see what happens. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to add some paint thinner to this one, though. We'll see. As you can see, we've got some pretty thick blobs in there. So I ended up putting thinner in it, giving it a good stir. And you can see there's still some small clumps on there, but it's definitely looking like paint. Now for the black, I've pulled the skin off that was over the top of it. Okay, this one's a little rubbery, but the handle is going all the way to the bottom, but it is possible that the pigment will be unmixable with the solvent. We'll just have to see. I'll give it a good stir and see what ends up happening. Alright, after about a minute of stirring, this actually has come up better than the Army Olive. Now this still requires a little bit of thinner. You can see it's quite thick, but it's definitely not as clumpy. Well, shoot. After a little bit of thinner, the black's looking pretty good too. Let's try painting something with them. Moment of truth for the Army Olive. Might have a bit too much thinner in it now. The second coat, though, would probably make that just fine. We'll give this a few minutes to set up. Compared to the green, the black is going on really, really well. The green took about 2 coats to get a nice even coat on it. As you can see, the black is going on quite smoothly, although I think probably the green, despite what I said earlier, might still require a little bit more paint thinner and a lot more stirring to get it evenly suspended. But there's the black. And I'm starting to think that this is flat black. We'll see in a few minutes after this dries. Yay, I guessed correctly. It is flat black. You can see there's just a little bit at the end here still drying. And there's a green, a little thick, but probably with just a bit more paint thinner and a lot more stirring. I think we could probably restore that bottle to full functionality. So, over 36-year-old paint, still viable despite the fact that it's Testors, which oftentimes is not the most stable long term. I think that's pretty cool. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.